Zombie companies in Japan. Should you work in them? Would you work in them as an engineer? And in this video, I'll be talking to you about what a zombie company is in Japan, the characteristics of one, how these companies become a zombie company, possible impacts on society or let's say your average dev job. And then I'll give you my take on some of these companies. By the end of this video, I hope that you can decide for yourself whether you can make it through a zombie apocalypse company. Maybe you're interviewing for a company that might be a zombie company. We're going to be discussing that today. Before you do that, make sure you like and sub, as well as connect with me on LinkedIn. And I also have a Discord. So Discord there for devs in Japan and devs outside of Japan. So let's get to this. First off, what is a zombie company? In Japanese, it's called a zombie kigyo. I've just got a quick translation here of what it is. It says zombie companies in English. This term refers to companies that are essentially dead in a financial sense, but continue to operate because they are kept alive by external support, usually through loans or government subsidies. These companies are typically unable to generate enough revenue to cover their interest payments or operating costs and rely heavily on continued financing to stay afloat. Sorry, my English is pretty bad. My reading is even worse. And so that's why I've got the zombie guys here. But remember, this is not exactly a black kigyo. These can somehow overlap, but these are quite different types of companies in my not so expert opinion and experience. So the zombie companies, I'm going to give you some characteristics. I've written down some here. And some characteristics of these companies, there's a lot of IT companies around who are zombie companies, is the low productivity. And you might say, a lot of companies that are low in productivity. That's one of the characteristics of a zombie company. Another one is a heavy debt. As I explained before, these companies are just in absolute red. They're not making profit and they can't even pay off their interests of their debt to banks, which leads them to be dependent on support. And look, these companies have banks or also investors, or if they're lucky, they're like connected to a larger company, and those larger companies, those holding companies, can just keep this zombie alive. I mean, it's dead. It's already dead, but it's just walking around dead. And these zombie companies can last for years, over 10 years for some of them. Just in the last, I think, 2 years after COVID, free tendies for all these companies, these zombie companies. So they've probably got another few years on them. Maybe some of them are going down now, and some of you guys out there are getting laid off. The three main reasons I've found of why these companies continue to be zombie companies is that, so one of the main reasons is that they were given loans on low interest or sometimes even 0% interests. And then what happens, as you see now, I think interest rates have gone up in Japan. I think that's quite recent. I'm not like an expert on this. So what happens is that they can't pay back their loans. They cannot even pay back their interest on their loans for their companies. And some of these companies are not paying off their interest, but are making some sort of increase in revenue, even though they're still heavily on the red. And then those banks do not want to, dissolve them, force them to file for bankruptcy or whatever. They just continue on to, I think some of these banks do not want further losses on their balance sheets, so they just keep companies alive. Some of these zombie companies are also funded by or given assistance from the government, so they can last a few extra years on. I think that happened quite a bit after during COVID times. So that's why I think a lot of people now are getting fired, even in Japan, some of these large companies. Of course, if you're a large listed company, I'm guessing the government would rather not have everyone unemployed. Something like civil unrest, or And I got to be honest, I've never really studied any of the stuff. It's just conversations I've had with CEOs or CTOs or people working in companies, and it's a common discussion. Not a common discussion, but it's something that you do talk about working in Japan, especially IT companies. And I'll give you some of the stories I've heard. through my experience talking to some leaders in companies. Oh, nothing, not big companies, but let's say 20-man or 50-man companies. One of the companies I was talking to, the guy's really nice, and he said he had one cash cow client basically. So some of these small companies have one massive client. That client provides all the projects. Once that client, something happens to that client, you're left with 20 engineers and no work. And so these companies will just live on the red for years. And that happens because these CEOs or CTOs of these companies are not that great at sales or didn't really learn that as they were growing. They just had a great cash cow client, gathered up 20 devs, and just made great profits. Then once that client goes away, they're kind of stuck. They don't have any other clients. The guy's stressed out, and he'll tell me like he would go to Roppongi and Ginza every weekend and just spend so much money. So anyway, that guy lost nearly everything, I think, and he had to rebuild again from the start. So it's quite, I don't know if it's common, but I've heard when I talk to people that this happens quite a bit. And you might see a company with a really beautiful website. You go to LinkedIn, they had a nice, looks all great. People are posting, oh, this is awesome. This company is great. You're on Wantedly. It looks really nice. Everyone's all suited up in that startup bro, that look, that startup bro look. And you just talk to someone who knows what's happening in the back end of the company. It's HR, maybe HR would know. You talk to the finance, the people in the back office finance, talk to the CTO, and you ask them like, how are things going? Because from the outside it looks great, and when you ask him how it's going, he goes, "Oh, this is we're in a bad situation." And then of course I don't say anything, but that happens. That's happened quite a bit, and even before COVID as well. So it's hard to tell just from looking at a company on the outside if it's a zombie company or not. And to be honest, I don't think many of these companies will tell companies nowadays in Japan, the ones I've worked for, give like an open statement about their earnings and losses and all that. But to be honest, I don't trust it. And the reason I don't trust it because I don't know if they'll get in trouble if they don't tell us the real numbers. I just don't know. I cannot trust that unless it's a listed company. Then I know that you can't lie on that. I mean, you mostly cannot lie on your earnings and losses and how the health of the company. But if it's not listed, I just don't know if they can be if they're honest about it. So that's something to keep in mind when you want to work IT in Japan. And some of you guys are already working in Japan are probably in a black company, or not black company, sorry. You're in a black company too, maybe, but you're in a zombie company. And the last part here I want to talk about is should you worry if you're in a zombie company? And I'm going to split this up to two different types of workers. One would be a junior dev. Let's say you're coming from overseas, or maybe you just finished a boot camp. Maybe you're a fresh grad, and if you're that person, you have no choice. You just have to get to Japan first. Then second, you have to get yourself a job, get that visa, get some experience, at least 2 years. That sort of if you're that type of person, if you're in the beginner stages, you got to take what you can get. And I know that's hard for some people to accept, but that's just my advice. You can do what you want, obviously. And then the other side is if you're an experienced engineer, you might want to be careful about doing that because, as I told you before, they might not utilize you as much as you want to be. They might not have the greatest projects. They might not, your whatever dev you are, they might not be able to utilize your skills because they're working. I mean, they're not competitive in the market. That's just how I see it. With a company who's competitive in the market, they'll be pushing for higher skilled workers or pushing their current workers to become even more skillful. In the end, you're selling, in most IT companies, you're selling your services, you're selling your skill sets. But if you're in a zombie company, you can have 200 workers and only have 20 decent engineers, and everyone else is just for the books, for the papers. And you'll see this, you can talk to a few guys around in Japan. They'll tell you, yeah, they know a few companies where you got a whole office full of engineers and you don't even know what half of them are doing. You find out that some of them are doing nothing. And then, yeah, then that's what happens with these, some of these zombie companies. You get comfortable in a zombie company for 2 years and your skill set goes down. You lose your skills. You stop coding well for about a year. You'll forget a lot. And then going through these types of zombie companies, at the end of it, if you're already experienced, you look less attractive. And then maybe you go to a next job, that company sees, oh, that's a zombie company. I don't know if they can do that or not, but it will show when they ask you, oh, so how did you deploy your app and whatever, and you go, oh, I didn't do that. Or what did you do? Then, oh, okay, this guy was useless for 2 years, and it doesn't matter if you did something prior to those 2 years that was great. Companies tend to look at what you've done recently. I don't know what that is, but that's how I'm understanding it. 2 years out of the game, you look unattractive. If you're 2 years in the game doing some hard coding, some real coding in whatever language, making real products, then you're fine, good to go. So that's just the two sides I want to explain based on my experience the past 8, 9 years working IT in Japan, especially as a freelance. I get to change companies every 6 months and I can see how every company is working on the inside. And I can talk to some people, go on drinks with some people and listen to what they are seeing in the company. And I can compare that with with my experience so far. So yeah, zombie companies, okay, if you're a junior. Above junior, you got to be careful. You got to find something else. You got to get your hands dirty on some real projects. Okay, so that's all I wanted to talk to you about today. Zombie companies, what do you think? Are you working in a zombie company right now? Would you work in a zombie company? You let me know. Like, sub, Discord, and LinkedIn. See you on the next one.